Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome all our audiences from all over South Africa, and especially welcome our facilitator and our panel of experts to this AFI Conversations. AFI has, over the past few years, hosted such conversations to bring knowledge and growth to the fashion industry, and we carefully curate experts to come and share their thought leadership, what's happening in the industry, and just generally in the economy. In 2018, AFI started on its journey of digital transformation. We re-looked our strategy and we introduced what is called AFI 4.0 in anticipation of the fast digital transformation that we're seeing in the world. Funny enough, COVID-19, or not so funny actually, COVID-19 has actually fast-tracked the process of us becoming digital. So today's conversation, which is titled Insights into E-commerce and Digital Business in the Era of COVID-19, could not have happened at a better time. So I'm hoping that we will have our audiences engaging with the panel members, experts in their fields, to better understand how COVID-19 is impacting on our industry, the fashion sector, as well as the e-commerce business. This might seem like a very difficult time in our lives, and it is. But what makes me hopeful is the fact that as human beings, we have overcome many challenges in the past. If you look through the Great Depression, the Spanish flu, in South Africa, we have overcome so much in our own selves. So I know that when COVID-19 is over, we will still be here ensuring that our businesses, our lives, our neighbors, our families are all intact. So I would like to hand over to Eleni Jokos, and I wish you a very successful webinar. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Dr. Precious. And it's such an honor to be with you today. It's under such different circumstances. I'm so used to being on stage and having an audience in front of me, but we are so fortunate that we're able to do it even this way. So welcome to all of you. A very good afternoon. My name is Eleni Jokos. I'm a correspondent at CNN. And today we're going to be talking about e-commerce and digital businesses in the era of COVID-19. The global pandemic, as we know, has created cataclysmic shifts in the way that we work, the way we engage with people, and the way we think about the future. Consumer trends are adapting to this new normal. So staying connected online, working from home, homeschooling, even the way we work out. The way we connect with our customers on virtual platforms has saved many businesses. Companies without a strong online presence have had to make very quick adjustments. And for those that did, well, they seem to be a very strong hedge against the demand destruction that we've seen. For some time now, e-commerce in Africa has been on the rise, but physical stores seem to still do very well on the continent relative to digital businesses, online stores as well. But since the start of the pandemic, according to research, we've seen a huge shift to online demand, specifically in South Africa. So just being online actually isn't enough. What are you selling? How are you delivering? How are you meeting consumer needs of today? Remember, things are changing dramatically, right? So before COVID-19, worldwide retail e-commerce sales was expected to grow by 265% from $1.3 trillion in 2014 to $4.9 trillion in 2021. Now that number is a total underestimation. So where are we going from here? How do we get involved in this disruption that we've seen? And as demand for e-commerce grows and as COVID-19 regulations extend our isolation, how are South African businesses and retailers organizing themselves to partake in the new normal, in the new world? So I have experts today that are going to be giving us their thoughts and hopefully helping you understand the future a bit better. We are going to open up for questions from the audience, so please engage with us, write to me, and we'll try and get as many questions out there as possible. So my panelists today, Sihlesenkosi Majola, e-commerce manager at African Fashion International. His role has been coordinating the development and growth of African Fashion International's new business direction into an e-commerce platform that helps African designers sell internationally. We just heard from Dr. Precious that AFI has been very digitally focused over the past few years. He has been working as an e-commerce manager for 5 years and having developed multiple e-commerce businesses. We have Xiong. Kelly is a manager at Deloitte Consulting within the strategy offering. In her role, Kelly has helped organizations across a number of industries better understand their customers, redefine their strategy, and improve their operations. With her experience in consumer packaged goods and retail, she's played a key role in bringing Deloitte's connected retail concept to life. Connected retail was an exploration of the impact of digital disruption on consumers and the retail sector. So we'll be hearing more about that. And we also have Herman Singh, the CEO of Future Advisory. Professor Herman Singh is the CEO of Future Advisory, an international firm specializing in digital transformation projects in corporates. He's also served as managing director of Siemens Industry Division. He then joined Standard Bank as a director of e-commerce and online services before becoming director of IT planning and CEO of the bank's innovation hub, Beyond Payments. In 2013, he moved into telecommunications as managing executive of eCommerce, and until recently, he was CDO at MTN. So those are our panelists today. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to start hearing from you. So please start thinking about what kind of questions you have, and then we can engage with our panelists. I'd like to start off with Sihle. And in fact, I'd like all of you to answer this question for me. How has your world, your life changed since the start of the pandemic, and how has that filtered through in the way that you're working, in the way that you're thinking about your day-to-day job? And Sihle, if you could tackle it first for me, thank you.
Thank you, Eleni. So with AFI as an organization, one of the major things about after COVID-19 was that we had just come from Cape Town Fashion Week. And from there, we were in the process of, after launching our e-commerce platform, in order to be able to grow it across the market. One of the things that happened as we were coming into this was that we had to put a lot of the things of ours on hold and work on a project to help designers, and also to be able to facilitate some of them, to help designers through this process, help them facilitate through this process of COVID-19. So that really has changed a lot of things, mainly because we are now working more from home than we would ideally be working at the office. And obviously we had to, some of the technology tools that we're working in-house had to be now implemented at a much more bigger scale within the organization, so everybody can be able to remain connected. One of the major things that this pandemic has done is that it halted all deliveries during the level 5 lockdown. And so we had to focus on making sure that the face mask, creating a project to help designers through a project for face mask. And also we had to maintain a presence online in terms of marketing and speaking about African fashion. And we had to really relook at what AFI has been doing as a model. We had to relook at some of the masterclasses, which we're now having online. And you also had to look at how we are engaging with customers, how we're engaging with designers, how we're engaging with everybody without having that physical interaction, but really working more online. So COVID-19 as a pandemic really has fast-tracked digital migrations for a lot of businesses, not only from a social media and outward pointing direction, but also internally, with internal organizations adopting tools that can allow them to be able to remain productive whilst they are still within their within their workspace. So it really has done a lot. And for e-commerce, it really is a huge game changer, because now those individuals who ideally were not online or did not want to make online purchases will now be more than willing to actually make an online purchase. Because even as everybody knows who works in e-commerce, sometimes customers don't want to buy, they don't want to use their card. They'd rather do an EFT, they'd rather go to the bank, they'd rather meet you face to face before they even make a digital transaction. But now, because of COVID, they are forced to make purchases online, which is really opening up a lot of avenues for e-commerce.
Have I been muted? You guys. Oh, there we go.
Unfortunately, yes, you've been muted. Sorry.
Sorry about that. So I'm still learning, right? New world. So you're so right about the demand destruction under level 5 lockdown, and even level 4. It's been, we've seen consumer trends changing so dramatically. So thank you so much for that insight. Kelly, give me a sense of what you've been doing, and has your role expanded? I mean, most of the people that I speak to that are in the e-commerce digital business space and working for large corporations, their jobs have been amplified and accelerated to find solutions and kind of deal with the new realities. Has that been your experience as well?
Yes, thanks, Eleni. So in terms of management consulting, I think we are quite fortunate in that the nature of the job can be done remotely. So all you really need is, a consultant and their laptop and a way for the team to be able to connect. So in that sense, I think the way of working has shifted dramatically, because now you're no longer sitting together. You can't just pop over to someone's desk, have a quick chat, ask a quick question. Now it's all about, Skype, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, different calls all day. And in terms of how COVID has influenced how we think about business, as an organization, we've actually put together a task team to actually understand from a client's perspective, how do we actually support them? As much as long term, you're still looking strategically, where are the growth areas, and how do you transform? In the short term, how do you actually manage your different priorities now that the landscape has shifted so dramatically?
Yeah, interesting. Okay, Herman, you've been in the digital space for a long time. What has it been like for you? I mean, I can see that you're more organized than all of us because you've got a green screen, which is amazing, by the way.
So thank you. So I think that in terms of my role as a director of companies, I'm on the board of a number of listed companies. And really, a lot of my time has been in emergency meetings. I've never been this busy in my life, helping listed companies to pivot. What are we going to do with staff? Can we get them to work from home? How are we going to, run the office? How do we deploy staff onto client sites? So a lot of that's been about pivoting, conserving cash, and to a large extent, saving jobs, saving businesses. On the side where I run my advisory business, what's become very clear, I've always been digital in that space, but what changed was there's a huge amount of fake news out there, and clients really want very factual, very true data on what's actually happening and what the best practice is to respond to this crisis. So if you're going to give people advice, you better make sure that it's right, number one. And number two, I have certainly found that the ability to continue to engage and manage relationships digitally has become really critical, because when you can't see people and you can't meet people, you better find a way to maintain contact with them during this crisis.
Interesting. I mean, you mentioned, saving jobs is really important. And, something pivotal that for me, you said, emergency meetings. What are the questions that you're getting? Because when I'm asking CEOs and I'm engaging it with, what are you doing? Everyone's saying we've got to figure out how to become kind of more digitally savvy. We were too slow, and now we have to adopt and become a lot more agile within that space. Are these the kind of things that people are asking you?
I think there's been kind of 2 or 3 different levels of conversation. The first conversation was a panic, right? Because when the lockdown came, nobody could come to work. So step one was, does everybody how can we split our staff into critical staff who can go on leave or who can't go on leave, non-critical staff who can go on leave, critical staff who now have to work from home, they don't have laptops, they don't have data bundles. Can we get them data bundles? Can we get them modems? How do we secure people working from home? How do we make sure that they get access to all the applications that they need? Then the question becomes, what do we do with our offices? How do we deep clean them? So it was a range of conversations really around and this sounds like nuts and bolts, right? But you got to keep the business going. The second conversation was, how can we extend our service out to our customers? How can we change our propositions? And how can we allow customers to work with us? Can we quickly get apps built? Can we quickly advise customers in a crisis? What are the questions that they're asking? How can we kind of get frequently asked questions out to clients quickly? So it really was about managing our staff, our stakeholders in terms of investors, and our customers.
Kelly, in terms of the new normal and the new reality, how are experts engaging with consumer trends that have adapted so significantly? I mean, it's interesting, research is showing that people are searching and buying mostly, for example, food. Garden furniture comes up as the top kind of search Clothing apparel is kind of low on the list. So that's interesting on that front. And then obviously entertainment, Netflix, and all the other online services. Does that mean that consumer trends are going to, move into that direction permanently? Or do you think this is just, one way that consumers are adapting to their new realities? But I wonder how businesses need to think about these new trends versus future trends.
So if we think about consumers and how they typically used to shop in South Africa and Africa for the most part are physical retail shoppers. If we think about South Africa, it's the highest modern trade formal retail country in Africa at 70%. But of that, only 1% is e-commerce up to this point, or slightly above 1%. So, traditionally and normally people habitually want to go into a store and, touch and feel a product, experience it before they actually bite the bullet and make the purchase. But the shift that we're seeing now is that because of the pandemic, it's changing the behavior of consumers. And that's actually the push that a lot of organizations needed, because often you'll see big corporates investing in e-commerce as a channel, but not necessarily reaping rewards in terms of profitability, because the operations behind it is so expensive and the contribution of that is very small. But now consumers are forced to actually consider this as a channel that they actually shop on rather than one that you do research on. But I think that the other thing to just take into consideration is the lockdown and the rules around, what are essential products. I think it will be interesting to see what the impact of level 4 is, considering now at the very least retailers can sell winter clothing and children's clothing. But also I think as fashion retailers and fashion businesses especially, it's important to actually just pivot and think about, what people actually need and use during lockdown and during the pandemic versus, what are the products you typically sell. I mean, for example, eventing.
Yeah, exactly. I find it fascinating. I mean, the likes of Net Florist, for example, has moved away from selling flowers and got into, selling, everyday needed goods from retailers. There was another store in Cape Town that specifically focused on clothing and then pivoting into organic goods from various producers. So you've got to pivot. And I find it fascinating, Sihle, if you could touch on this for me as well, where you have businesses that have the existing infrastructure. So you've got an online presence, you have people that follow you. Perhaps you need to change the way that you're viewing your product. I wonder how you foresee this happening within the retail space, and how are you guys adapting at AFI?
Thank you for that. So in terms of pivoting, it's very, very important for an organization that wishes to survive to be able to be flexible enough to change. And that's really one of the issues that organizations face, ones that mainly strongly around the and now have to rechange the model and go on e-commerce more than ever. And with a lot of organizations that were cash-strapped in the past or were having specific issues in terms of growing their logistics side of e-commerce, they now have to invest more in those infrastructure that allow their e-commerce to work more efficiently than ever before. So it does allow for organization to change, but honestly, the pivots comes with organization's ability to shape, because sometimes you find that there are processes that don't allow it to be as quick as you want it to be. One of the things, the advantages of COVID-19 is that a lot of processes have become obsolete. They've become, they're no longer relevant in the current climate that you're currently dealing with. You can't do paper anymore, you have to do more electronic. You can't do anymore, you have to do electronic. You have to move your organization in order to be able to implement it. So for every brick and mortar, it's the ones who will survive this time, the ones that are able to pivot without having processes hindered whilst they're doing that. The second thing on AFI's side is that as AFI was mainly an events organization, and we have already started implementing our online platform. Now events are the event market is currently at a complete standstill. No one is making money in the industry right now. And the organization has to look at their model and change it to be something that actually can benefit from. Looking at other organizations where they're now changing from having open events to having closed events, AFI has been opening stuff up through webinars and also being able to promote more designers on its platform on a sales basis instead of a runway basis. And this is really where AFI is starting to work around, because as an organization, we are flexible enough to be able to. So those are some of the challenges that occur. Another one, for example,
Sihle, for some reason, we had a bit of a breakup there, but we heard most of what you said. I'm not sure what is wrong with your line, but I'm going to go to Herman now. And we've just gotten a question coming through from Shailendra Hari. Thank you for the questions, guys, and please keep them coming. I'm going to start posing them to our panelists. The question is, the current level 4 legislation to limit e-commerce could be seen as strangling the rise of e-commerce in SA, but additionally, the inequality in South Africa is seen as a stumbling block for e-commerce in the country. Is government correct in saying that this will further the digital divide? Herman, your thoughts?
Look, I think the digital divide falls into a number of areas. One of them is access. In other words, can I access the internet? Do I have data? Do I have a device? I mean, that is an endemic problem in Africa overall, right? Because data is too expensive. People can't buy bundles and they don't have a way of actually accessing it. In fact, there are many areas in the country where you can't get data signals, especially if you're in deep rural. So the digital divide is real. And the challenge that you have, I guess, globally is the digital divide. It maximizes and enhances the level of disparity, of economic disparity between people. So for example, if a young child has access to the internet, they can study online, they can research online, they can build a better career online, I can shop online. A person who doesn't have that clearly has a number of disadvantages to meet. That's the first point. The issue in South Africa is obviously the government's being very cautious. I'm not sure if you saw my post on LinkedIn this morning, but South Africa is one of the only countries in the world where the number of people dying in the country overall has dropped. It's the only country in the world where that's true, right? In other words, so during the COVID crisis, the number of people that normally 9,000 people die a week, it's now dropped to about 7,500. Now that's astonishing. And that's happened because the government was very strong, very early, very quick, and very strongly enhanced the lockdown. So if the objective was to save lives, well, we've done that tremendously. Now, how many of those lives came from COVID? That's debatable. But the point I'm making is the government took a very pessimistic view of this. The challenge we have, of course, is that inherently, if you look at America, for example, Amazon's share is flying. You look at what's happening in Europe, the same thing is true that if you look at China, and you look at JD Group, and you look at Alibaba Group, who are the two biggest e-commerce engines, they are all pumping. Because the most logical way to complete commerce in a pandemic is to order online. So I think we missed an opportunity there, and my recommendation to government is to move from a level 4 to level 3 and to definitely, open up e-commerce, because it's such an obvious no-brainer. We've got to get that working.
Sihle, I know you've got thoughts on this as well. Could you give me your sense? I was talking to the African Development Bank, and they're saying, look, in Africa, 80% of what drives economies across the continent is the informal sector. And here we are talking about e-commerce businesses. We also had a question coming through again from Shailendra Hari saying that the post office has actually launched a digital portal to connect informal traders with customers, which is really fascinating. The question is the post office too late? But I'm also just wondering, do you think it's going to work in connecting with the informal space to a more kind of digitally savvy reality and world?
Well, I can't say whether it's going to work or not. I can say that it's a great step in the right direction to be able to allow businesses to be able to come online and be able to
Sihle, we've got breakup coming through from your side for some reason. I'm going to give you a few minutes perhaps to sort that out. I'm going to ask Kelly, would you like to tackle that question for me?
Sure. I think I caught a bit of what Sihle was saying in that it's, a step in the right direction. And I definitely agree with him on that, because ultimately you need a a body like government to give it enough of a push to actually support the informal sector. Because, you know, if you think about informal sales and retail, traditionally it's a person buying something from someone directly. So how do you actually shift that to a digital environment, especially when the seller and the buyer both don't typically engage in that area when it comes to, you know, shopping. But I think also what's important is, especially for, you know, entrepreneurs and small businesses, is not to go from 0 to 100 and think, you know, I need to have an e-commerce platform, an e-commerce business, but actually think about what you can leverage from what's existing and what is the minimum that you need to actually continue running your business. It could be something as simple as maintaining a relationship with your existing clients through, you know, WhatsApp or social media.
That's really fascinating. I mean, Herman, you know, again, I kind of go to the point where you said, you know, businesses are asking, you know, what do we need to do to plug into this new reality? And I know that there's been a rise in e-commerce businesses over the past few weeks. I just wonder how sustainable it is. Is this kind of push towards, you know, creating more digital businesses and e-commerce businesses a step in the right direction, do you think? Or do you think we're underestimating what it really takes to put these businesses together? Because you've got to think about digital marketing, you've got to think about organic searches, you've got to think about what you're selling. Do you have the value chain that can support your online business? It's not just about saying, here's my online business. You've got to have the back end support. I guess it's not that easy.
Yeah, it's good. And if I can, Eleni, just comment on your previous question first. If I may, the issue of the post office is very interesting for me because, you know, when Amazon started in 1998, the last mile was through the post office. And today, in fact, the big issue in America, the reason the post office is going bankrupt is because basically, and that's in the States, is because they're not charging Amazon enough. And that's a problem. But the point I'm making is, if you plot the number of emails in the world versus the number of letters in the world, there's a graph that looks like this. This is the number of emails, and that's the number of letters. So basically, post offices have no reason to exist other than parcels, right? So it's logical to me. If you've all heard of a company called DHL, DHL's full name is DPDHL, and the DP stands for Deutsche Post. Deutsche Post is German for German Post Office. So it's Post Office DHL, right? So the post office should have been involved in e-commerce for the last 20 years. Right? And so I'm glad they're getting into the game. We're 20 years late, but better late than never. Look, I've been involved in building very large e-commerce businesses across Africa. I was deputy chairman at Jumia. We built a very large fashion business in Saudi Arabia called Wadi. And we built a very, very large, the number 2 player in Iran, business called Snap. And the interesting thing is, we've had massive political and economic turmoil in all of those regions. And the volume of e-commerce kept climbing. And the reason that the volume of e-commerce kept climbing is basically there's something inherently superior to shopping online versus shopping offline. Why? Well, firstly, I do it in the comfort of my home, number 1. Number 2, merchandising is so much better and so much easier. I can find the right products. It's called assortment. I can get the right clothing. I can, you know, if you look, for example, at Saudi Arabia, you can't show someone's face on a website. One of the biggest things we were selling in Saudi Arabia was makeup, right? Even though you can't show the face. And so people figure out a way to sell stuff. And remember, in Saudi Arabia, we couldn't show a female form. Female clothing was our biggest selling item. We used to show the clothes without somebody in it, right? And the same in Iran. So the point I'm making is there's something inherently sticky about shopping online. And we see it in multiple countries. That's the first point. So the issue is choice. If you look at, you know, guys in Lagos trying to shop and looking at the choice and assortment that they get, they just don't get what they get out of Jumia. I think there's 1 million items on Jumia versus what you can get in a normal mall. So I think it makes a lot of sense that you should be shopping online. The guys who are firing up now, we've got to be very careful about that because, you know, the guys that pivoted from flowers to food or from boutique shopping to, you know, I'm going to shop groceries for you. I'm not sure that's sustainable over time. I was reading yesterday that some company, one cart, I think, went and hired 450 people overnight. And basically the reason they were able to do that is they were shopping for people and they were able to pivot faster then Take A Lot could. And that's basically what happened here. Take A Lot should have moved.
They're just using, because they've got the infrastructure, right? So they understand logistics. They were delivering anyway. Now it's like, well, we just need to deliver other things that people really need during this time. So that also takes a sense of, you know, you've got to be agile and going, well, how do I solve this problem?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, other online businesses, I mean, we were saying Uber, their competitive edge was being digital and online. You know, unfortunately, they're coming under pressure globally, by the way. You know, Airbnb, same thing. It's about the offering as much as it is about the systems, right?
Yeah. I think any business that requires people to meet face-to-face is in big trouble, right? So if you look at airlines where I saw a simulation of somebody sneezing on an aeroplane and how many people would be infected because the air is actually recirculated. Nobody wants to fly, right? Nobody wants to use a room that somebody else used. So you've got to deep clean rooms now. Nobody wants to use a cab that somebody else has sat in and who may have been ill, right? And nobody wants to rent from a flat from someone where the previous people were there, where may have been infected and the host didn't deep clean. You can understand the sensitivity around face-to-face or things where we're in contact. That's quite different to online shopping, though.
Yeah, okay. So Sihle, I want to touch on apparel. I want to touch on, the fashion designers that you guys have worked with. I want to talk about the fact that we've seen, through the years, a rise in African-made clothing. And this has really just halted a robust industry. I know some fashion designers have pivoted into mask making or even PPE, and they're thinking about being, different, but not everyone can get into the same space. What is your sense about, how retail is going to emerge from this, and how people that are in the space already need to start thinking really seriously about creating a digital presence from now in anticipation of an uptick?
Thank you for that. So from AFI's perspective, we're looking at the market and we're looking at how the behavior of customers is really changing. So within there was a growing sentiment of African fashion. There's always been one. A lot of African fashion weeks are being hosted by different organizations across the world, and there's really been a fever around it. But one of the things that we've looked at was the fact that there was always a competition between African fashion and the rest of the fashion industry. And right now, it's just opportunities to be opened up. Most designers will now be opening their own e-commerce stores. Most of them will be focusing their marketing on online instead of going to farmers markets and other markets to sell their clothes. Most of them will be focusing on having a stronger social media presence and doing social media marketing. Because before, in the past, most designers didn't really have a strong e-commerce store. They didn't really have a strong presence online. You'd find that either it's their personal brand that really pushes them, or they have a team behind it in order to be able to grow. And it will be just a matter of now more designers investing it. As AFI, what we've seen is within the markets is that we're getting more traffic from international looking at what currently is being offered by African designers, but also as more designers are getting into the face mask game, more designers are selling face masks online, we will be able to see more variety. And the beauty of African fashion being prints is something that is really starting to grow, and we are seeing it on our data as more customers come onto the website, review, as more people look at products that are currently on offer, as social media really galvanizes and grows behind designers who are creating face masks. So there's a real sense of urgency and a real sense of pride as well in terms of what the designers are currently doing. For the future, one of the things that we're looking at is that because most designers will now be looking at third-party websites to host their clothes, looking at international businesses like Etsy, like AFI Designer Boutique, like Net-a-Porter, to be able to really share and get more engagements from individuals. More diversification will happen in terms of designers, in terms of how they market online. It won't be just a matter of I'm only dealing with this brand. It'll be I have to diversify where I put my garments in order for me to get the most out of it. So there's also been a really strong behavioral shift with designers around there. There's more collaborations currently happening. More designers are are working together and working with brands in order for them to be able to grow. And because all businesses are also coming onto the party and offering much more favorable deals, the cooperation within the industry is going to set a foundation that allows designers to be able to grow in the future.
So Kelly, if I could get you to jump in here and just perhaps comment on some of the points that Sihle made, and also just keeping in mind, and I've been looking as a journalist, just looking at the companies that have been coming under pressure, the companies that were already, at tipping point, for instance, like Edcon, we knew was in trouble, but, we also knew that perhaps they didn't adapt as quickly as possible. So I wonder how, adaptive you need to be. And I'm also just concerned about, flooding the industry, the market with just so many e-commerce and digital businesses where to differentiate yourself is going to be a lot harder.
So, businesses like Edcon, as you mentioned, that were struggling already, there were fundamental flaws in how they operated, and strategically how they, thought about their business and how they thought about their consumers and customers and how they fulfilled the needs. So, even without speaking about e-commerce, there were issues in the business that needed to be resolved. And one of those things is really understanding what your customers want and need. So for any business that's thinking about going onto e-commerce, you need to understand, do your customers even shop online? Do they have the digital infrastructure? Are they digitally enabled to actually do that? Do they like doing that? And the other thing is, it's always important to think about how you manage your costs. And like you said, there's going to be a lot of fragmentation in the market with so many different businesses popping up, each trying to draw a little bit of the pie into onto their websites. So I would say actually, if you can, try and leverage existing platforms where there is already a significant base of customers that you can tap into. Where possible, try and partner, and don't try and go the whole hog yourself without needing to. And the thing about standing apart and being able to differentiate yourself is, it comes down to what you're offering and how are you satisfying a customer need. So if you don't fundamentally understand it in the first place, irrespective of what channel you play on, it will be a struggle.
But let me ask you this. I mean, the e-commerce digital businesses that have already established their consumer base and have a strong presence seem to be outperforming. If you've got new players now suddenly coming in, I mean, who's going to survive? In my mind, it's always the older businesses that have a stronger platform will tend to do better. I mean, what kind of business can truly disrupt the digital space going forward? And I mean, just the people that are listening that might have an idea, how do they get that right?
So I think it's always difficult when it's a case of David and Goliath, where often Goliath will just continue growing, sometimes just through acquiring to get more scale. So I think definitely don't always think of it as the giant corporate is my enemy. Think about how you can use them and use their scale, use their infrastructure, because Sasa Takealot, they do have a platform where people can trade on it. But for a business where you really want to stand out, it's going to take quite a bit of, I think, investment in driving that demand. So, in the beginning, demand generation, like Sihle was mentioning around, driving your digital marketing, trying to reach out to your audience. And, nowadays anything can go viral. So it's about finding your niche.
Yeah. And it's also about, converting old people. I'm not old, but old people like me that are traditional, because I'm honestly, let's not talk about my online consumer trends. But Herman, we've got Gavin Raja, who's just asked a question, and I'm going to get you to tackle this for me. Gavin, great that you're listening in. Thank you for joining us. So he says the fashion context is pretty specific. For as long as we know, most brands have literally transmitted information and expected consumers to simply receive without engagement. So whilst digital acceleration is key, surely new world order of doing business can't exist with old world business structures, ethos, and positioning. How do you engage with consumers meaningfully through digital channels? And how do you convert Eleni? Very important.
Okay, yeah. So I think it differs depending on whether the thing you're selling is physical or virtual. So if the thing's physical, I physically have to deliver it to you. Yeah. If the thing's virtual, I can email it to you, I can stream it to you, or you can download it. Those are two fundamentally different businesses. So if you want to build a business where I'm building classifieds, right? All that a classified business does is it connects buyers to sellers. Could be cars, could be houses, could be jobs. Well, that's a very different business to building a mall online, right? So the first thing you've got to do is split these businesses. One business moves information, one business moves real things. And the third business, by the way, moves people, which is the travel industry, which is now Toast. So in the world where you're moving information, it is very easy to be disruptive. Why? Because there's no legacy. So if somebody launches a better Netflix, I'll switch tomorrow, right? What's my switching cost? It's zero. If somebody go and look at the number of music streaming services. I've got SoundCloud, I've got radio, I've got Pandora, I've got, I've got Google Music, I've got, iMusic. I mean, I think I've got 3 or 4 different music platforms. So the point I'm making is, if the thing that you're selling is inherently digital and I can send it to you across the internet, disruption is a very real threat. Banking, insurance, those kinds of businesses are in big trouble. If you look at physical businesses, the problem is to go out and build warehouses, last mile delivery, to try to build out a hub and spoke logistics system, to implement track and trace, to have, pick, pack, ship, etc. To aggregate, to do cross-docking, all of these things is a huge amount of work in the physical world. So I think the challenge in the physical world where you're delivering physical things is really the logistics side. It's easy to, so therefore it makes more sense for people to adopt what Jumia did in Africa. And what Jumia did in Africa is I was part of the team when we launched it, and we launched it as a shop. It was like Edgar's Online. And that was dumb. It was dumb because what happened was we, as Jumia, had to carry all the inventory. And we had to figure out what customers wanted everywhere in every segment. It became too difficult. What we then did is we pivoted from being an online shop to being an online mall. And nobody has done this in South Africa properly. I mean, Takealot does it at the fringes, but basically, when you buy from Takealot, when you order on Takealot, you're buying from Takealot, right? What you really want to do is go to the Jumia model. What Jumia does, they built a single website. They then brought on board tens of thousands of small businesses.
It's creating a marketplace, right? It's creating a digital marketplace.
Exactly. And what then Jumia did is they then went out and they built the Jumia brand, brought the customers, developed insight, and did marketing.
You're saying South Africa hasn't really done that yet. So you're talking about that can be filled. So we've got people that are listening that perhaps can fill the gap. So how do you go about doing that? And I want to say a big thank you to Busi Mavunga, who's been commenting, by the way, and I've been watching your comments. And she's asking the question about how do small businesses and entrepreneurs develop their business models to compete in this new e-commerce environment, and how do they grow a significant customer base? And here you are talking about a gap in the market. How many gaps exist and how do you build them?
Look, there are lots of gaps, and the gap I'm describing is an intermediary gap, right? It's an aggregation gap. Think about this. Does it make sense for every small business to go out and build the warehouse, the inbound logistics, outbound logistics, payment engine, branding, and digital marketing? No. It makes sense for one company to do that for everyone, right? But then this company that builds it can't compete with anyone. So they become a utility. And so that is the ideal model for South Africa, is a company should build this. One, a series of warehouses, a series of connections and logistics, one payment engine for everyone. And then what they need to do, they need to go out and gather information about customers and share it with all the small businesses, and then help each small business build their digital marketing campaigns and basically make them successful. And that's exactly what Jumia has done. I would really encourage people to go out and have a look at what the Jumia model is and how it works in Africa.
I've engaged with Jumia quite a bit, so it's interesting. Sihle, you've heard about gaps in the market and things like that, and I'm just thinking, an awesome marketplace for all fashion designers, headed by AFI. I know you were saying you're predominantly an events company, and fashion events globally have like literally non-existent. How are you guys thinking about this? If I'm giving you business ideas, I want in, hey?
No, I understand. Thank you for that, Eleni. So with AFI, we have done a strong move towards digital. For the organization, even before anything happened, Dr. Precious was already on the direction of the fact that the organization needs to move online, needs to build an aggregator platform that will allow designers to be able to sell internationally without having any issues. And that's where we are currently headed. We've already launched the platform and we already have designers on the platform, and we are currently rolling out our marketing across the entire country and also on the continent. So for AFI, moving digitally was already in the pipeline. It would have been different if it was not already in the pipeline, because as many organizations, you find that e-commerce was just a part of the business and not the focus of an organization. And because that caused a lot, that helped some organizations, but it also kept a lot of the old infrastructure still in place and not going really much anywhere in terms of where it can be able to invest it in. So now, because of COVID-19 and how businesses have to change, they have to really now look at the fact that their brick and mortar is no longer sustainable. It no longer makes sense for them. But also because of this, it also causes a lot of problems. Jobs change. How people work within the organization change. How they identify themselves as an important figure within the organization also changes. And all of these things have to be put into consideration when an organization shifts from being working in a different sector, just as AFI in events, to going into online and selling online. And with what Herman was speaking about in terms of having a nationwide aggregator that allows small businesses to work off its platform to be able to move, that is something that is sorely needed by the organization. Jumia has done an amazing job in terms of building out its infrastructure, because a lot of the countries in Africa have an infrastructure problem. South Africa is not really one of them, but the problem is that there's not much coordination within the market to allow everybody to be able to benefit from them. Most businesses are being built up in order to meet logistical challenges, to meet packaging challenges, to meet marketing challenges, but not one business where everybody can say, so long as I'm selling on this platform, I can be able to benefit from my brand. And that is something that is really currently needed by the market. And I can really do second that. So AFI building an aggregator platform, our aim is to be that assistance, to at least throw our own weight in helping designers around there.
You know, Sihle, there's a question that's come up a couple of times from people that are watching in today, and they're talking about how do you educate the informal traders or the informal guys to understand that they need to get their products online, for example, and then how do you, also engage with people that, are not living in the privileged environment that you and I are, to be able to also want to engage and buy things online. If we can be ahead of the curve when it comes to, financial changes in the likes of East Africa with M-Pesa, why aren't we able to do something similar with, e-commerce in the digital space? Sihle, what's your sense on this? You've got to, it can't be exclusionary. It has to be inclusionary across the board.
That's very true. So with e-commerce and comes with the informal sector, one of the things that we need to realize that are technologies currently available that help the informal sector. There's Facebook Marketplace, which allows individuals to be able to upload their images and sell to a wider variety of people. WhatsApp also allows for individuals to be able to engage through WhatsApp Business and have links that are associated with either their website, or can be links that associate with already a Facebook where they have their product catalog already there. One of the most important thing is that when you're starting, especially on e-commerce, you don't need to have a website, but you do need to look at the current platform that exists that can help you get to a point where you understand how to build an e-commerce business. So WhatsApp, Facebook Marketplace, Instagram, where you're able to tag some of your product, adding products on your Facebook page. Those are already the starting steps for any business. Before you start investing a large amount of money in building your own infrastructure around e-commerce, you can use other businesses that already have built the infrastructure for them to come on board. One of the things that we can't really assist on is the kind of technology a person holds in their hands. And that really plays a huge role in the kind of customer you receive. Because a person who has a phone that's a low quality phone cannot be able to go on Instagram and view some of the other products or some of the things they as easily as a person who has a high quality phone. So even the devices that people hold in their hands play a major role in how they engage with specific brands and also sell online.
Thanks for that, Sihle. Johnny Muteba, welcome, sir. He's the CEO of Pan-African Chamber of Commerce. Really amazing to see the kind of people that are joining us as we embark on this conversation. He's got 2 questions for us. How do we work together more collaboratively to empower young entrepreneurs in Africa to acquire digital skills to compete in the global economy driven by tech and innovation? And then how do we grow African brands for them to support brand Africa? Kelly and Herman, I'd like for you guys to tackle those. Kelly, I'm going to start with you. What's your sense?
So I'm looking at the question now. I think in terms of AFI and helping young entrepreneurs, AFI is definitely already has a presence and a history of doing that, where they go out and uplift young designers and help them start and manage a business. So especially now with AFI's aggregator platform. So on the one hand, they are consolidating consumers and shoppers that are like-minded and are looking for fashion. On the other, there's things like AFI Masterclass that I believe would be a great channel and a vehicle to actually start educating people around how to start and run a mobile or digital business.
Got you. Herman.
I think there's 2 things. One is you do need to start to aggregate all the content that exists on the internet around how to start up a new business. This is now very well understood. So if young people want to know, the internet is an amazing resource. There's tons of sites, there's tons of resource. Maybe what we need to do, as an industry is aggregate that and collect that so that people can find it easily. But really, I'm a proponent that you don't really need to teach people. They if they're hungry enough, they'll go and find it. So let's make them hungry and then let's help them find it, right? So we shouldn't spoon feed them. That's the one point. The second point is, I think we've got a perfect storm for building African brands. And there's a number of reasons. One of the biggest reasons is we've got to move beyond China. What do I mean by that? I mean that one of the net consequences of this pandemic is the world's come to realize it's excessively dependent on Africa as a manufacturing engine. We all need to start manufacturing, which means fashion jobs and clothing jobs are coming back to Africa. They have to, right? That's the one thing that's going to happen. It has to happen. The fact that we were in a queue waiting for PPE is shocking. No country could make their own masks and their own clothing. And we couldn't make ventilators, and car factories were stopping in America because we couldn't get components. Everyone's realized that we have to move, we have to reverse globalization. So there's a whole bunch of factories coming back. Now, the way that we bring them back, and so that's the one aspect. The other aspect is the collapse in the rand has meant that we can't afford to import foreign brands anymore. That's just gone, right? Those brands are just too expensive for us. So it's a perfect time for us to be building our own brands. If you look at the work that I did in Saudi Arabia and Iran, the biggest section of work that we did was to actually build our own brand. And I think that's important. Build your own brands in South Africa, move those factories back to South Africa, and let's make sure that we build cost-effective solutions that are relevant to this country.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because, we were meant to go live with the continental free trade area, mid this year, and, opening up borders, people and things like that. And the lockdown, I guess, has changed that completely. But I think it speaks to the essence of what you're also saying is bring manufacturing to the continent, open up factories and things like that. I just also wonder what this pandemic is going to do to value chains. When I look at what's happening in Europe, for example, where value chains are being disrupted, and then in the US, you're seeing very similar things. It kind of makes me worry about where we could be headed if the pandemic really does, increase to the same extent that we've seen around the world. I don't want to be a doomsayer, but I guess we've got to be realistic as well. How do we adapt to that, possibility of worst case scenario, making sure that our value chains remain robust? Unfortunately, we've always had problems with value chains across the continent. We've always had problems with logistics across the continent. We've had problems with creating our own textiles and fabric. We've been importing it, even if we do start making actual clothing here. Who wants to tackle that?
Can I just weigh
Yeah.
in on that? So, with the issues that Africa has been facing, with the Continental Free Trade Agreement, we need to look at the fact that it is currently an opportunity for the continent to be able to build its own infrastructure that allows it to be able to implement the Africa Free Trade Agreement. The reason why I say this is because instead of us working on competing with international markets, now the entire world is at a standstill, and you are given opportunity to work on building out and getting all of the right agreements and everything sorted out within the continent that can allow us that when more and when the world really starts opening up and markets start really rebuilding themselves, that you're in a better position to be able to handle it. And I'll make one example about that. Alibaba, one of the organizations, the biggest e-commerce in China, actually played a major role in building the logistic infrastructure, the payment infrastructure, and the sale and some of the sales elements of China. And that's really what we within the continent have to do. And as AFI, we've been looking at the fact that apparels as one of the major trades that happens within the continent. It's something that, because a lot of the manufacturing had been moved to different countries, now that is no longer an option, and therefore it provides an opportunity to reinvest in the industry of fashion and really grow it within the continent.
Thanks, Sihle. We have a question from a designer. You might know who he is. We're so grateful that we've got such incredible people. I've said this again. Thank you so much for joining us. Mzokisi Mbane, he's an AFI affiliated designer with his brand Imprint. His question is mostly around the event element and the fact that with fashion, we don't necessarily sell, but we need to have events so we can bring out the luxury element. And with the world already filled with fashion, it always comes down to how a collection is sold and introduced to the consumer, the story in the fashion show. So my thinking is around how will AFI combat that with the digital new age? If there is no fashion event, what innovation is being put in place to make sure that designers who needed them for what the Fashion Week did still come back and they still sell the new story to the collections? And I guess I think fashion designers and fashion brands around the world are basically asking that same question. Particularly, I probably want to tackle this.
So thank you, Mzogisi, for asking that question. One of the things that we'll be looking at as an organization is just working with designers to do some virtual fashion shows, and also just to do collaborations with more designers. As the events business is really at a standstill, every fashion show organization is currently really looking at their model in terms of how they will be able to grow and tackle what is currently happening within the market. And as AFI, we've already done a virtual show on our last day during Cape Town Fashion Week. And that is just an example of what an organization can do when what is needed by it in terms of growth. There won't be any more fashion shows where there's a lot of people within a room, but there can be fashion shows where they are runway designers, and also they are runway models going down the runway showing their items. And from there becomes a better understanding in terms of the images that are currently available, where when an item is seen on a virtual fashion show, that item then is able to be monitored, see how much it trends on social media, which then allows you to see where fashion trends are going. It is still a very, very important element. Fashion Week is still a very, very important element for any organization, and also for AFI, it is one of our pivotal pillars as an organization. And as we move digitally, fashion shows will also be moved digitally, and it will have a much bigger audience, where instead of where 100 people, 200 people, or 1,000 people, 2,000 people come to the show, it will be 10,000 people tuned in live to watch the entire show unfold in front of their eyes. And I believe I've seen technology take something that can be exclusive and make it completely available to everybody.
We are slightly going over time, but I just want to tackle one question and welcome Sihlesenkosi Majola. He's a fashion designer and CEO of Mahone. And the question is quite long, but this is the gist of it. How do we preserve the fashion industry, and how do we release seasonal collections with all these changes in place? And I'm really curious to see what, the new, summer, winter seasons are going to be for the next year, because, let me tell you, I've been confining myself to wearing 2 to 3 outfits so that I don't have a lot of washing. So I'm sure a lot of people around the world are probably doing the same. I'm letting you in on my secrets here. Sihle, I'm sure you want to tackle this. And then I'd like to go to closing comments from all our panelists. Sorry, I've kind of dominated Sihle here, but lots of fashion questions coming through.
No, that's no problem. That's no problem. So that is something that's, as an organization, we'll be tackling over the next couple of months, because as you know, we have 2 fashion shows every year, Cape Town and Johannesburg, and it's something that is a real hard question for any design, in terms of looking at what the current situation is right now and how buying trends are changing. And as AFI, it's something that it will always be a constant. The fashion shows will always exist and will always allow for designers to be able to showcase. But for a designer who's showcasing a new range for a new season, we have to play everything by the ear. A new norm is being created as we speak. And it's not something that we can say lightly, but it is true.
Outfits, I'd like fashion designers used to get something really comfortable for me at the bottom, but really fancy at the top.
Yeah, okay. No, just understand.
I'm actually going to ask what everyone's wearing at the bottom. Should I? I'm too scared. Anyway, so listen, there's a few questions coming in. I've just asked the organizers if I can just steal a bit more time. But Kaylee, a question that came through, who are the winners and who are the losers here? If you could just tackle that. That was one of the questions that came through.
So I think in the context of COVID, it's hard to say, exactly who is winning and who is losing, because everyone is gaining benefits in some areas and losing out in other areas. So if I think for businesses and fashion businesses, you're definitely losing out on the opportunity, especially prior to level 4, to trade and to engage with your customers. But in terms of, a benefit is that now your customers are driven to a digital and online channels, and you're actually exposing yourself with the right setup to a much wider audience. So, I mean, Sihle mentioned that as well, with fashion shows going digital, you're actually removing the limits of travel as well as venue space. So in that sense, you actually are able to tap into a much bigger platform. From a consumer perspective, obviously before level 4, we weren't able to shop. We were confined to just buying essentials, either maybe from the grocery store or online, if you will. But at the same time, you're learning to operate in a very, very different manner. And I guess in the sense of winning, you're getting time to spend with family. But I think from a fashion perspective, we're definitely looking for things that, like you said, now cater to a very, very different environment that's like business on top and party and comfort at the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, interesting times, right? Herman, you're such an expert at this. I'm going to leave you to kind of comment on some of the things that you've been hearing. Look, I think it's people like you that are going to help us navigate our way through these turbulent waters and these cataclysmic events. I guess my question, if you could just add this into your answer, is just how are we going to look post-COVID? Like, what is the world going to be like? It really scares me. That question really does scare me.
So I actually posted something on I used a picture to post something on a topic I called the ego economy. And I said, it's the end of the ego economy. And I had a picture of a whole bunch of zombies, Walking Dead. And everybody said, why the hell did you put that picture? I said, well, because nobody's brushing their teeth. Nobody's using shampoo. Nobody's using deodorant. Nobody's using perfume. And nobody is buying clothing. Now, how do I know this? Because I had a look at the trading results for Unilever and for Procter & Gamble. And sales of deodorant, perfume, and shampoo have collapsed, right? So we know for a fact, and I don't care what you're using, guys, but I know the ego economy is collapsing. So that's the first point I wanted to make. And I think it's a very important point, because in a world where nobody else can see us, we don't care how we look.
I mean, wait, Is toothpaste sales down? Are toothpaste sales
Do me a favor, go and Google Unilever Procter & Gamble deodorant and ego economy and see it's just collapsing, right? So that's the first point. There's a fundamental shift. The second point, and so the winners are going to be the people who go, okay, what's the new economy going to look like, right? I mean, you pointed out that we really need upper body clothing rather than lower body clothing, but there's a lot more to that, right? I think we've got to rethink this whole concept of seasons. We've got to think through what is work clothing. We've got to think through, what kind of events are we going to have? Why can't I have 3D based marketing where I can pick up a pair of shoes in 3D, turn it around, and it feels like the shoe's in my hand, but it's not, without wearing goggles, right? To get that experience. So that's the one point. The second point I just wanted to put out there was, the fashion industry is a huge contributor to CO2 loading in the world. And one of the things we've got to do, this is never waste a good crisis. This is a great opportunity to improve our carbon footprint. We should use it, right? And the final point is, Facebook is number one. There's no number two. Pinterest is number one. There's no number two. Twitter is number one. There's no number two. Amazon is number one. There's no number two. But Airbnb is number one. Nobody can name the number two competitor in any of those industries. Why? Because the minute you move towards the internet, the biggest player wins. And this is really, really powerful, right? This is a winner-take-all model.
Yeah, so this kind of speaks to a question that came through from Nicola Cooper. With Amazon entering South African business landscape, will this help or hinder existing online platforms? And are we in discussion with them on how to assist and grow opportunities?
Look, I don't think Amazon wants to enter retail. I mean, to enter retail, they should just buy Takealot. But it makes more sense for them to come in and run their cloud business and do business hosting, which I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think if Amazon came in to do that, that would be hugely beneficial for South Africa. All
right, guys. We've run out of time, but I want to give you an opportunity to give me kind of last comments, a bit of advice to our viewers. I mean, we're talking about demand destruction. We're talking about level 4. We're talking about people losing their jobs. I mean, it's such a difficult situation that we're in right now, and it's not endemic to just South Africa. You're seeing it globally. Unfortunately, it's accentuated the inequalities we have in the country. And I wonder how we can, contribute to the betterment of the economy post-COVID, or even as we start letting up and allowing economic activity to continue in the country. I want last comments, and I'm going to start with Sihle and then Kelly.
Thank you, Elena. From AFI, we believe that going down the e-commerce route and opening up the platform to more designers and more people around the world is the best option that we currently have right now in order to be able to help the industry not die, but also grow and flourish in the future. And because of that and our efforts in building AFIBoutique.com, which is our aggregator platform, this is what we are working tirelessly in terms of accomplishing. And for all the panelists and everyone who's attending the session, thank you very much for being part of the session. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you for asking questions that we can be able to tackle. And we hope that we were able to share all of the insights and also able to answer the questions appropriately and accordingly. So from me, Sihle, I'll say thank you for the session. And for those who want to see what we are doing and what AFI is currently doing, visit africanfashioninternational.com and AFIBoutique.com, which is our e-commerce aggregator, to see what exactly we're doing if you want to take part of this.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I've got a question. I mean, CMTs, people that have been making clothing and plugged in with fashion designers, how have you been able to ensure that there's job retention within that space? Has it been something that's been very top of mind for you?
Yes, actually, it's been extremely top of mind. So one of the things that AFI is currently doing, that we are creating relationships and engagements with CMTs. We're working with some of the CMTs to help us in our face mask initiative. And the goal is to build out the entire infrastructure that we need for the aggregator to work efficiently. And one of that is also having good relationships with CMTs. So we are in talks with a lot of CMTs to help us if we have manufacturing shortfalls, and we can be able to help some of the designers. So all of these things are still going to be to light to everyone in terms of who we are working with and how we're working with them. But over time, it will be something that's shared. But yes, definitely, we're working with CMTs.
Thanks, Sihle. Kelly, over to you.
Thanks, Eleni. So I think just closing comments from my side is for businesses that are trying to navigate this new reality, it's, first of all, just understand in terms of your clients and your customers, maintain that level of engagement, maintain the relationship, understand how best they want to engage, considering that our options are now limited to more digital. And in terms of, still running a business in this reality, it's about leveraging the scale of platforms rather than trying to go about it on your own. And finally, because like Herman mentioned, our realities are so different now and our priorities are so different. Understand during COVID, during the pandemic, when people are under lockdown, what do they use, what do they need, and just try and shift what you're providing into that area.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Kelly, and for you, Herman. By the way, I did put on perfume today because it makes me feel good before I, speak to an audience.
Okay. I guess the only point I would make in closing is, America's going to announce today or tomorrow that the unemployment rate in America is between 15 and 20%. Now, last year it was 3%. So it went from 3% to 20%. 20% is on the high side. South Africa can't be immune to this. We're going to move from, 27, 25% to probably 35, maybe 40%. So let's say half the people in South Africa are not working. If they're not working, folks, how important is fashion in their lives? Now, I think you got to start there and accept. There's a fundamental shift in affordability, and there's a huge swing towards value shopping. And so I really would urge everyone in this community to take that to heart. We're just not going to have discretionary income. We're not going to have disposable income. Start thinking about the way to make people feel good with less money. And I think that's the future of success.
Guys, thank you so very much for those insights and sharing some advice that we can take to heart as we try and get through the next few weeks. Who knows what's to come, but we obviously are hoping for the best. So thank you so very much. And I've got Dr. Precious standing by. She's been listening in. And again, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I hand over to you for closing comments. Thank you, ma'am.
Well, Eleni, thank you very much. This has been a very, very informative, inspiring discussion. I thank Herman, Kelly, and Sihle, and yourself, Eleni, for sharing your expertise and your experiences. And I'd like to pick on Herman's words about not wasting crises. Only a crisis, and this is, I'm quoting Milton Friedman, only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. And when that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on ideas that come from everybody. So I'd like to thank our audience also for the questions that they have posed. They've made us think deeply and broadly. And thank you all very much for this very important conversation. Lastly, can we just clap hands for our first responders, the doctors and nurses who work in hospitals, taking care of our nations. We're gonna do a virtual clap of hands for all the healthcare workers. Thank you so much, and take care, everybody. Keep well and keep safe.